So we now have our React Native. So we have our components here. So now let's create a home screen for our application. So let's create a custom component. So function, home screen. And we are going to return a view. We have view component added. So here we're going to add a view. Then we're going to add some attributes to our view. We're going to add some style. And we will add a screen view component to our styles in just a second. And inside of our view, we're going to add some text. So let's add a text tag. And in here, we will just say home screen, just so we can see that we have a screen loaded. All right, come down to our styles here. We'll add screen view. And we're going to add flex of 1. We're going to add a line item. And we're going to align them to center. And we're going to justify our content to also be centered. Save that. All right, next, let's add our stack. So we'll create a constant. We'll call it stack. And this is going to be our navigation stack for our windows or for our screens. And we're going to create stack navigator. So we'll call the method create stack navigator. And that creates our stack object. Now, in order to use the stack object and actually put our window inside of our stack, we come down here to our app section. Let's get rid of this default view. And now we need to use a new container, our navigation container. And inside our navigation container is where we're going to apply our stack. We're going to call the navigator module of stack. So we now have our, instead of a view, we have a navigation container, which contains a stack navigator. And inside the stack navigator, we're going to add our screen. We'll do stack.screen. We're going to give it a properties name of home, which we'll use for referencing the screen later. And the component we're going to tie it to is our home screen. And this is a self-closing tag. So when we save this, we now get our home screen. So we can now see that the code displays an empty navigation bar, so no navigation bar, and gray content area containing the home screen text. All right, so that's fairly simple. So now let's set up the navigator to handle another screen. So when dealing with the navigator, we have to configure all of the routing using properties. Now, in this example, we did not set up any properties because the stack, by default, will take the first screen in the container and use that to render the first screen. So let's create a second screen here. Let's do function, other screen. Going to return another view. We're going to use our style. And we're going to use styles. And we're going to reuse our screen view. And we're going to close our view. Oops, access view. View. And now we want to add some text. And we'll just call this another screen. Okay, pretty straightforward. And now to add it to the stack. So we come down here and we copy our stack screen here. We create a new name to reference our new screen, other. And now we need to point to the new component. We'll do other screen. And if I run this, we see we still only get home screen. However, our application now has two routes. We have a home route and an other route. A route can be specified by using the screen component. The screen component accepts a name property which corresponds to the name of the route we will use to navigate, and a component property which corresponds to the component it will render. In this case, the home route corresponds to the home screen component, and the other route corresponds to the other screen component. Now, by default, the initial route for the stack is the home route because it is the first screen in the stack. However, if we change to other and reload the app, so let's change the order. So if we swap this around and save this, you'll notice that React's native's fast refresh won't update the changes from the initial route name, as you might expect. Instead, we have to open up our console here and hit R to reload our screens. Now we see that we have the other screen displayed. That's because when the application loads the first time, it loads this stack, and this does not get reloaded until the application is closed and reopened or forcefully reloaded. So let's switch this back. Save. You notice it didn't refresh. So we come back out here, forcefully refresh, and now we have our home screen. Now there's some additional options and parameters you can pass through your screen. So let's talk about how we can specifically set the screen options and passing additional properties. First, we can use the stack screen option attribute, which we can then use to set things like the page title. And as you can see at the top, we changed the title of our screen to home. Or we might want to pass some additional properties to a screen. And we can do this with two approaches. First, we can use the React context and wrap the navigator with a context provider to pass data to the screens. Now, this is recommended, but outside of the scope of what we're going to cover here today. The second approach, we can use a rendered callback for the screen instead of specifying a component property. And to do that, what you do here is we don't self-close the tag, but instead we can wrap the properties inside of a props here. And then you can define some properties for your particular screen. Now, again, this is outside the scope of today, but I did want to mention this. So in case you do want to pass properties or some values between screens, this is one way to do it. And we'll cover that in a future lesson. Scroll this back. Right. So next, let's look at moving between the screens. So let's look at how we can actually navigate between our home screen and our other. So before we look at how to navigate between the screens, let's review how this would have worked in a web page. So one way we can do this from a web page, browser, let's go back to Dr. Who stuff. So one way is to actually go to the tag and call the page directly. So we can do the anchor tag href and hard code the value to our page. Another way is to actually wrap an element with a onClick function that we could then use the window.location.href and then pass in the page name that we would want to call. So we can essentially use JavaScript to call an onClick command to change the window location to a specified page. Now in React Native, we'll do something similar to the latter, but rather than using a window.location global, we will use the navigation prop that is passed down to our screen component. Let's update our dependencies. And I already added button, so we now have button, which is going to act like our anchor tag. And next, we need to add a navigation property to our screen. So let's add navigation. We've added a property to our home screen. And then in here, let's add a button. Give it a title. Go to other screen. And instead of on click, we're going to do on press. And we're going to do a self-calling function. And we're going to call the navigation property that we're going to pass in dot navigate. And then we're going to give it the reference that we have defined down here. So we're going to use the name other so that we will call the other screen. And I need to oh yeah, that's close button. There we go. Now it's happy. So now when we look at our screen, we now have home screen and go to other screen. So if we click go to other screen, we now navigate over to other screen, and we have the default navigation bar or breadcrumb up here that we can use to go back and forth between the screens. So let's recap. So first, we use the navigation prop, which is passed into every screen component in the stack navigator. Then we added the navigate other here using the navigation. So we called the navigate function in navigation property, and we passed in the page that we wanted to go to. So this calls the navigate function of the navigation props with the name of the route that we would like to move the application to. I would like to note, though, that if we call navigation.navigate with a route name that hasn't been defined yet, it'll print an error in the development build and nothing will happen in the production build. When you try to run this, it'll fail. It'll throw a message. Right? So now, what happens if we keep navigating to a route multiple times? So let's make a change to our other screen. Let's also add navigation. And in here, let's also add a button. And this time, we're going to go to the other screen again. At least we're going to attempt to. All right, so over here in our application, we have our home screen. We'll click our button to go to the other screen. Now we have another button on the other screen that if we click here, looks like it's clicking, but nothing is happening. So if you'll notice that when we click the go over again, it doesn't do anything. Now that's because we have already, we're already on the other page. We're already on the other route. The navigate function roughly means go to this screen. However, if you're already on this screen, then it does nothing. Now, if we really want the application to add another other screen to the stack, to the route, this is pretty common if we want to pass in some unique data to each route. So let's not touch on passing data for now. Instead, let's look at how we can make the application add another on screen to the stack. Now to do this, we can change the navigate here to push. This allows us to express the intent to add another route regardless of the existing navigation history. So now, each time we call push, we add a new route to the navigation stack. When you call navigate, it first tries to find an existing route with the name and only pushes a new route if there isn't yet one on the stack. However, with push, it will continue to push whatever component you're trying to add to the stack, regardless if it's already loaded or not. And now if we click other, we can go back up the navigation till we get back to the home page. So the header provided by the stack navigation will automatically include a back button when it is possible to go back from the active screen. So if I click go to other screen, we have this back button here of home, which will take us back to the previous screen that was called from. When there's only one screen in the navigation stack, there is nothing you can go back to. And so there is no back button or back navigation. If we really want to rely on the stack to handle this behavior, we can just use navigation.go back to trigger this behavior programmatically. All right, so let's look at another example. So let's add two more buttons to the other page. These buttons will allow us to return back to the home screen. At the top of the stack, we can call the navigate not to push to reset to the top of the stack. So first, let's come down here and add another button. All right, we'll add a title of go to home. We'll use the on press attribute, and we will do a self-calling function, and we will call navigation dot navigate, and we will go to the home page or home. Now, if I go to the other screen, I have two buttons. I have go to other again, or I have go to home, which returns me back to the top of the stack, and it removes the back button. Now, if we only want to go back one screen in the stack without using our navigation button at the top of the screen, we can use the navigate function go back. So let's add another button here. And we will name it go back. On press again. Calling function, call the navigation. And this time we will call go back. Now, if I go to the other screen, I now have go to other screen again, go home, go back. So if I click go back, we go back up the queue, just like if we were hitting the navigation button up here. Now, one thing to note though is on Android, the React navigation hooks into the hardware back button and fires the go back function for you when the user presses it. So it behaves as if the user would expect it to. So again, if you're on Android and you hit the go back button, it basically triggers the same functionality. It calls the same go back uh, function. All right. Does anyone have any questions?
Yeah, I mean, I've seen you do Linux. Does this require a lot of Linux?
No, this is all app-based development.
Yeah,
The
so
only Linux piece here you can actually do on Windows 2, but you have to kick off either using Node or Expo. You have to start the emulator essentially for you to run your native applications on your desktop.
Okay.
So it's just a command line. It's not necessarily Linux.
Okay. Gotcha.
Good question. Any others? Nope. All right, so let's review. So React Native doesn't have a built-in API for navigation like a web browser does. React Navigation provides this for you along with the iOS and Android gestures and animations to transition between screens. We also talked about the stack.navigator, which is a component that takes the route configuration as its children with additional props for configuration and rendering of our content. We can also add multiple screens using the stack.screen component, which takes a name property, which refers to the name of the route, and the component property, which specifies the component to render for the route. Now, if we want to specify what the initial route is in the stack, it's provided we can use a property for the initial route name, or just set our default screen that we want to load first at the top of the stack. If we want to navigate to a screen, we use the navigation.navigate module, and we pass in the property of the name. So we pass in the component name. This pushes a new route to the stack navigator, and it is not only if it's not already in the stack. Otherwise, it stays on the screen. For instance, when we click from the new page to go to the other page, when we use navigate on the other page and tried to click the button again, it didn't go anywhere because the page was already loaded. We also noticed that the header bar will automatically show a back button, but we can programmably go back and forth using the go back function. You can go back to an existing screen in the stack with the navigation navigate command, or you can go back to the first screen by using another property that I forgot to mention here. You can actually also use use top to top, which will also jump you back to the top. So this will actually take you back to the home page. So that one, change the navigate here to pop to top, get rid of home. All right, so now if I go into other page again, I click home, it took me all the way back. And last, the navigation prop is available to all screen components as defined as the screen in the route configuration. So if we go look here, as long as we pass in the navigation property, it is provided to us by the navigation container. I'd like to thank you for your time. If you would like to discuss any of these topics further, you can send us questions or comments to any of the following methods. You can reach us at email, info@developer.com. You can find us on our website, developer.com/contact us. We're also on YouTube at youtube.com/UCZOUFN_LHCZVGY P2KSLTH_G. And finally, you can find us on Vimeo at vimeo.com/developer. Our goal is making every developer better. Have a great day.